Is death the end? Depends on who you ask. Heaven, hell, reincarnation? Who knows what awaits on the other side, if anything at all. But what if we could claw back those who had already passed on? What secrets would they be able to unveil? And would they retain all of their former selves? It's these questions that have driven me all of my life. And finally, after a lifetime of meticulous study, I have my answer. After a lengthy career in conventional science, I was approached by an organisation called Surge. They shared my desire to uncover the mysteries of what awaits us after our deaths, and they pledged a sizable sum to my research. This included a team of talented and like-minded scientists. I could hardly believe my luck. With these resources, I was confident I'd uncover the truth sooner or later. Of course, our research was top secret and anything but legal. To obtain the answers we sought, we needed to bring back animals with intelligence, and as you can guess, this meant people. Needless to say, this was highly unethical, but in the pursuit of furthering our race, it's a necessary evil. I always believed that. To ensure our work remained a secret, each of us had to give up our personal lives and live on site at the secret underground facility where we conducted our experiments. A few of the team were reluctant to do so, but given the importance of our work, they eventually relented. We began full of excitement and anticipation, but as the years went by, it became much like any old job. I still had the same passion for answers, but with no advancement to show, I was a little demotivated. Ultimately, it would take 35 years of research to get anywhere close to what I would call progress. My team and I used just about every form of science we could. We tried electrification, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, biological symbiosis, and the list goes on, but nothing seemed to work. This was until we discovered what we call the resurrection frequency. We discovered that emitting ultra-precise sound waves directly at various portions of the brain causes the body to resurrect itself. However, while this was a monumental breakthrough, we struggled to adequately fine-tune the sound waves, as they had to be more precise than what our equipment was capable of producing. This meant we were only partially able to reanimate the human corpses. Some would exhibit as little as muscle spasms, while others would breathe and even attempt to speak. Over the next year or so, we learned a great deal more. Corpses were only viable for approximately an hour or so after death, so we began cryogen freezing on our test subjects to ensure they didn't spoil. We also discovered the duration and sequence of which we should focus the resurrection frequency at the brain. This was to ensure all former faculties were restored, not just movement and speech. We needed our subjects to remember. Finally, the day came when we developed a precise enough machine to put all of our research to the test. We called this Experiment 3582, and as the lead scientist of the team, I was tasked with spearheading this pivotal experiment. The subject's name was Danny. He was 27 years old at the time of his death and was killed in a hit and run. He didn't die on impact, but rather later in the hospital as a result of his injuries. This was crucial information that I needed to know, and that which I would ask him about as soon as he returned to the world of the living. Properly informed, I gave my co-lead a nod. He ushered the rest of the team out of the room and readied the machine. As you can expect, coming back from the dead is a rather traumatic experience, so our procedure is to not overwhelm our subjects with too many people. I always handle the interviews, but thus far, I'd never had any comprehensible answers, if any. This experiment would mark the change of that. I carefully wheeled the test subject into place beneath the machine, and my co-lead turned it on. The exposure process takes just 20 seconds, no more, no less. As usual, the test subject exhibited no signs of life halfway through being exposed to the resurrection frequency. However, abruptly after 12 seconds, the subject began violently shaking. This had never happened beforehand and caught me completely off guard. I screamed to my co-lead to turn off the machine. He'd already half rushed over to me out of instinct, but quickly turned back to shut the machine down. I was at a loss. What on earth had happened? We'd never seen reaction to stimuli so soon after the resurrection frequency, and never violent shaking. What a shame. Back to the drawing board, I thought. I picked up my clipboard with my analysis sheet and wrote fail in big capital letters. Subject began unexpectedly convulsing. Sequence terminated prematurely. Just as I did so, I heard a deep groan beside me and lifted my clipboard. Test subject 3582 was alive! I looked at my co-lead in amazement, and he was just as shocked. I wheeled the subject away from the machine and took a good look. His eyes were moving beneath his eyelids, and some of the colour was returning to his body. I quickly moved to remove his restraints from the bed and sat on the chair beside him. Hello? Can you hear me? The subject continued to wriggle around for a few seconds before slowly opening his eyes. He turned his head and met my gaze with a puzzled expression. Do you know where you are? I asked. Sitting upright, he attempted to say something, but his voice was too hoarse. "Take it easy," I said. "This is normal. Here, drink this." I handed him a cold glass of water, and he quickly finished it. "Can I have some more, please?" he inquired. "Of course," I answered, handing over another. He finished that one off just as quick as the first. "What is your name?" I asked. I can't really remember. I think it's, Damien? No, that's not right. Danny. Yes, that's it. Danny. How did I get here? Remarkable, I thought. At least some form of his memory remains intact. What a breakthrough. That's right. Your name is Danny. We'll get to that in a moment. First, I just want to ask how you feel. Do you have any pain? Can you move your body properly? Danny waved his arm up and down and turned side to side. Yes, I'm feeling rather stiff, but I can move okay. Though I'm really cold, and really hungry too. Could I possibly get something to eat? Certainly, I'll grab you some food momentarily. We'll just need to cover a few things first. This is going to be difficult, but you need to hear it. I'm sorry to tell you, Danny, but you unfortunately passed away 3 years ago. What? Yes, you were killed, I'm afraid. Don't be so silly. How can I have been dead for 3 years? I'm here now, aren't I? Just settle down, Danny. Everything is fine. We brought you back using science. This is a private facility studying resurrection. What a load of garbage. Why would I believe such a ridiculous lie? You don't have to believe me, I said, before presenting a newspaper article of his obituary. This angle was a touch direct, but I hoped it would quell some of the anger he had, and it did. I died? No. How could I have died? I understand this is upsetting, but it's important you know the truth. Now, do you remember how you passed away? This is so difficult. I remember walking back from soccer practice. It was late and quite dark out. I tripped on the sidewalk and fell onto the road, and then before I could react, a car ploughed straight into me. It didn't even stop, it just kept going. I just laid on the ground as my blood collected in a pool around me. I'm sorry for making you have to relive that experience. I just needed to check that your memory is functioning as it should. Now this last question is the most important. What do you remember from after your death? From after my death? Yes, you've been dead for some 3 years. What can you recall since that time? Well, I can't remember anything. Dying on the ground is the last memory I have. What? You can't remember a thing? Surely not. Even comatose patients recount various experiences they had. But I was dead. How would I remember anything? I've had enough of your questions. Go and get me some food. No, I'm going to need more than that. This is my life's work. You will remember what happened after your death, and you will tell me. Oh, will I now? And how are you going to guarantee that? I'm not talking anymore until I get some food. Go and get something big. I'm starving. No, some blankets or a coat would be nice too. Very well, but we're not done. After you've eaten, we'll continue this discussion. Test subject 3582 gave a dismissive flick of his wrist to this remark. I didn't like it one bit. I headed to the kitchen to grab the requested food, and I was joined by 2 of my colleagues along the way. How disappointing, Richard said. How can he not remember a single thing? I know, exclaimed Marco. Perhaps we need to adjust the machine? He didn't get the full exposure after all. Marco was right. It didn't make any sense for subject 3582 to get revived. None of our research pointed to that eventuality. I agree, I said to them both. Perhaps subject 3582 will remember more over the coming days. In any case, we should check the machine is calibrated and make another attempt tomorrow. They both agreed and went their separate ways in the canteen to pile up their plates. I grabbed one for subject 3582 and piled it up high as per his request. On my way back to the lab, I grabbed some blankets as well. Upon seeing the food, subject 3582 was ecstatic. He hopped over before I had a chance to set the food down and began digging in. Delicious, he said as he stuffed as much food as he could into his mouth. I handed him the blankets, and he quickly snatched them and covered his body before diving back into his food. It was clear I wasn't going to get any more answers out of him in this frenzied state, so I waited for the evening to continue our conversation. Danny, are you feeling more satisfied now? Enjoy your food? I certainly did, but there wasn't enough of it. When's dinner? He eagerly gleamed. Quite the appetite you have there, my boy. I can grab you some grub shortly, but you know, we never finished our conversation, and I'm afraid I need some more answers. Danny was not amused by this. Look, I don't remember anything. It's like I said, the last memory I have is bleeding out on the road. Really? How about feelings and emotions? Do you recall experiencing anything at all? Maybe the cold? I think I felt cold. I can't even get warm now. Interesting. How cold did you feel? And did you have it all over your body? It's not as if I was standing in a blizzard. It was more of a dull coldness, the same as now, and it's all over. Curious, I thought, scribbling down his observations on my sheet of paper. Perhaps he retained some link to his body even after death. But then he should have been colder, especially in the morgue. And that's not even to mention the cryogen freezing he underwent. No, he should have been much colder if this were the case. Interesting. Any other feelings you can recall? I don't think so. That's it. I'm just really hungry now. Very well, Danny. You did help me, so I'll go fetch some food for you. Upon giving him his second meal, he was just as ravenous as the first. I showed him to his temporary quarters for the night, locked him in as per protocol, and called it a day. The next morning, I walked into the laboratory to hear banging coming from Subject 3582's quarters. There you are, he said. I'm starving. I need some breakfast. What is it with you and food? I snapped. Some people don't even eat breakfast. Guess I'm not some people, he sniggered. I rolled my eyes and fetched him a plate that was overflowing with bacon, eggs and hash browns. Upon unlocking his quarters, Subject 3582 dived out and began devouring the food. Somehow, he looked even hungrier than the day prior. Are you okay? I curiously asked. Yes, just got a big appetite, he squeezed out in between mouthfuls of food. Right, I ask that you remain in this area for the time being. I'll schedule somebody to come and give you your meals, and you'll be out of here in, around a week or so. He nodded, unmoved, more interested in his meal than anything I had to say. Whatever, I thought. I headed to the lab where our experiment with Subject 3583 was ready to get underway. How's the machine looking? Is it properly calibrated? Discover any faults from yesterday's experiment? No, my co-lead firmly stated. The machine was set correctly. We can't work out why Subject 3582 began shaking. No matter. This test will give us much needed intel. If it works properly, great. If not, and we get the same results, we can be sure that it wasn't an anomaly. Each of my group looked around at one another and nodded in agreement. And with that, they left the room and I readied the new subject beneath the machine. With a nod, my colleague turned the machine on. I carefully studied my watch, counting down the seconds. And sure enough, as soon as we hit the 12-second mark, the subject began violently shaking. Jesus Christ, turn off the machine! I just don't get it. What are we missing here? I wheeled Subject 3583 from under the machine and he began moaning and turning just like 3582. In fact, everything was the same. This subject had trouble remembering his death initially, was a little combative and cold, but ultimately remembered nothing from after his death. Oh, and he was also rather hungry just like 3582. I headed to the canteen to fetch him a large meal. While there, a few of my team discussed our thoughts. Look, we may not know what's after death, but look at what we have done. We've brought someone back from the dead. We've done the impossible. I smiled, and Richard gave me a friendly jab on the arm. You've changed the world forever, friend. With that, we heard the sound of food trays clattering to the ground. We whizzed around to see what was going on and saw one of the food staff on the ground with trays around her. To my surprise, Subject 3582 was frantically scooping handfuls of food from each serving bowl into his mouth. Danny! I shouted. What are you doing? I told you to stay near your quarters. No response. He didn't even look my way, just continued grabbing as much food as his hands could hold and piling them into his mouth. Security! I screamed. We need security in here! They were in the room in a blink, and they descended on 3582. Even as they dragged him out of the room, he clawed at the near-finished trays on the table, growling like a starved animal. Put him in the observation box, I yelled after them. Perhaps I'd been too quick to discount his sizable appetite. My colleagues looked at one another, concerned. I quickly filled the plate I was holding and rushed back to Subject 3583, wondering if he'd too soon start exhibiting the same symptoms. Upon presenting the meal, he ate with a degree of decorum which filled me with at least a small sense of relief. Off to the observation box, I thought. I need to figure out what is going on. Hungry, so hungry, 3582 groaned. Just a little meal, give me some chicken or fish, I just need something. You've just eaten, Danny, I retorted. You shouldn't be hungry. But I am, he cried. I need food. I motioned Rod to go and fetch some food and off he went. In the meantime, I needed to learn some more about 3582. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hungry would you say you are? 10. Definitely 10. So you're on the brink of starvation? I guess. I don't know, just get me the food. I began scribbling down on my clipboard. 3582 experiencing significantly heightened levels of hunger. Perhaps an unforeseen side effect of the resurrection frequency is a large consumption of calories. Aggressiveness is also heightened. Relax, Danny. We are fetching your food. I also noted down that the subject appears erratic. He's scanning the room in swift and sharp movements. 5 minutes later, I heard the footsteps of Rod approaching as he returned with the food. Beef. I love beef. I turned to look at 3582. Beef? There isn't any beef, I'm afraid. Rod entered the room holding a plate stacked high with beef and mash. Puzzled, I asked, how did you know he was bringing beef? 3582 eagerly hopped from foot to foot, clapping his hands. I could smell it. You could smell it? This was unprecedented. 3582 was exhibiting a vast heightened sense of smell, well beyond the capabilities of a human. Hold on a second, Rod. I think we need to press pause for a moment. Really? We might as well just give him it now, no? It'll go to waste otherwise. No, I think we should hold off on giving 3582 any more food for the time being. No! It's my food! Mine! The guard to the observation box chimed in. Look, you're not the one who's going to have to deal with his screaming until the next meal. I'll give it to him. I don't think that's a good idea, I argued, but the guard dismissed my concerns and unlocked the door. Stepping in, he chucked the plate at the floor, causing the beef to bounce away. 3582 pounced at the beef, finishing it off in seconds. Damn animal, the guard spat. The mash was finished off just as quick. More, where's the rest? That's all you get, he said as he turned to walk out. And that's when the nightmare began. 3582 leapt at the guard, sinking his teeth into the man's neck. As he did, the guard screamed, and 3582 ripped away the flesh, causing blood to stream out of the guard's neck. 3582 chewed euphorically and smiled, revealing bits of meat stuck in his teeth. Nice and warm, he said with a sinister smile. My team began running off in different directions in a panic, slipping over one another. Everyone was too afraid to get close to 3582. It's like we'd all fallen into a lion enclosure, and our instincts kicked in. I took off to the living quarters with a few others. Those doors had locks, which meant we would be safe, at least for a while. Yet as I turned the corridor to the narrow passageway where our living quarters were based, I saw subject 3583 before me. I heard screaming. What's going on? He asked. Nothing, I quickly sputtered. We're just, fetching some medical equipment. One of my team had a nasty fall. A nasty fall? He inquired. I hope they're okay, he said, before tentatively sniffing the air. What's that smell? Smells delicious. Could I have some? I took a step back and looked at Rod and Richard. They looked just as terrified as I was. Yet Rod's appearance quickly changed to one of fury. He stood in front of us, brandishing a knife from the kitchen. This experiment was a failure. Back to the drawing board, before rushing toward 3583 and plunging the knife into his heart. He stepped away, expecting 3583 to fall, but he didn't. Instead, 3583 looked at him in shock, before slowly pulling the knife out. A few spurts of blood followed before stopping. He touched the blood with the other hand, carefully studying it, before licking it from his fingers. His gaze then locked onto Rod, and he charged at him, knocking him down with ease. I stood there in horror as 3583 bit down on Rod's face and tore violently, in doing so, degloving a large section of his cheek, revealing the muscle beneath. Rod screamed like a helpless deer as he went in for another bite. This time 3583 opted for the nose and tore it clean off. I'm ashamed to admit, I ran. I couldn't help Rod. I could only help myself. I sprinted to my quarters and locked the door, trying to think of a way out of this nightmare. The entire time being tormented by the screams of my dying colleagues. There was only one way out, and that's the way I came in, through the front entrance. It's heavily fortified and key-code protected. If I can just make it there, I can escape, and neither subject 3582 nor 3583 will be able to follow. After a few hours, the facility fell quiet, but I decided to wait longer to be sure. I chose to leave the safety of my living quarters in the dead of night at 3 a.m. Upon opening the door, I was greeted by white walls stained heavily with blood. No bodies though, and no 3582 or 3583. I carefully crept through the facility, peering around every corner. It seemed no room was left untouched, as each was heavily bloodied with a thick metallic smell lingering in the air. As I turned into the room with the exit, I spotted them. 3582 and 3583 were manically pressing keys on the keypad. They were trying to get out. I slowly retreated backward, never taking my eyes off of them. 3583 stopped and sniffed. His head snapped in my direction, and he was on me in a flash.
Meat. We need more meat. Outside. More. We must go. Feed. Code. Give.
I can't give you the key code. I can't let you out, I said. 3582 screamed in fury and dove toward me, pushing 3583 aside. The last thing I remember is the pain of having chunks of flesh ripped off of my neck and watching the two subjects fight as I bled out. Nothing else followed. Nothing. Just a dull coldness. I awoke feeling achy and struggled to open my eyes. As my view came into focus, I recognized the machine pointing down at me. I'm hungry. So very hungry.